All right. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 12th, 2012 Board of Education business meeting. And tonight you get a twofer. You also get our public hearing on limitation of administrative costs. The board has actually been in session since 5:30 this evening. From 5:30 to 6:30 we were in closed session. We discussed the approval of the May 16th, 2012 and the May 22nd, 2012 closed session minutes. We then also discussed and reviewed the closed session minutes for the last 6 months of closed sessions in preparation for their release to the public. And we discussed employment of employee. At about 6:30, we then had our very first meet the board in an informal setting, and that was for the few that were here right on time. We were with our little circle of chairs in the back, and we just had an open discussion with whoever wanted to come and discuss. And one thing we learned is we could have discussed for a lot longer. So for anybody we cut off, we apologize, but we had to stick to our schedule, only to be delayed by technology. So it's now 7:55, and we're going to begin our regular board meeting. So let's start out with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first thing on our agenda is the limitation of administrative costs public hearing. Does that mean any special procedure? Or?
I believe you have to call a roll call first.
Okay. All right. So I'm calling to order the hearing on the limitation of administrative costs. First, Ellen, can you call the roll?
Ms. Ebner?
Yes.
Here.
Here.
Mrs. Droney?
Here.
Mr. McDonough?
Here.
Ms. Hirsch?
Here.
Mrs. Steuben?
Here.
Mr. Bloom?
Here.
Mr. Collins?
Here. At this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Pernod to discuss why we're having this hearing and what it's all about.
Yes, this is in response to a legislative requirement that limits administrative costs in any one year to a 5% or less increase. This year, we exceeded that cost, and so we are required to hold a public hearing for that issue. Now, because we are in the bottom quartile of administrative costs, we are allowed to hold a public hearing, and the board can vote to allow that to happen. If our administrative costs were not so low, the district would not have that option. They would have to have some other remedy. But because we are in the bottom quartile of administrative costs in the state for unit districts, this option is open to us. So with that, I'm going to have Chris Welton do the overview and explain what happened, why we are over the 5% cap established by the legislature. Chris.
As Dave said, the current limitation of administrative cost worksheet for District 205's budgeted expenditures in excess of the 5% threshold. The excess was caused by retaining the former Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations through October of 2011, while employing her replacement beginning July 1st, 2011. Board of Education decided that this was prudent due to the tremendous administrative changes taking place in District 205 at that time. It was felt that the continuity provided by retaining her services was critical to day-to-day operations. Not only was the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations new, the district had just hired a new superintendent and 2 other assistant superintendents who were new to their positions. As Dave pointed out, the District 205 was ranked 378 out of 388 unit districts by the Illinois State Board of Education for administrative cost per pupil. And so we were in the lowest quartile for administrative cost per pupil, and therefore may waive this limitation and still be considered in compliance.
So this evening, after board discussion, we have a resolution for the board, if the board wants to vote on a resolution that would allow us to exceed the 5% cap. And again, we're allowed to do that by state legislation because we are in the lowest quartile of costs per pupil on administrative costs.
Yeah, why don't we allow the board to speak first, and then there'll be the opportunity for public comments on this specific topic. Ms. Hirsch.
Thank you. I just want to, this is an unusual case for the district, and I just wanted to explain a little bit. Having been on the board at the time that we had a large shift, we had 4 new board members coming on just post-election. We had a new superintendent. We had a lot of changeover at the time, and the decision was made to keep Pat Masterton on in her position to provide some stability and some institutional knowledge transfer as much as should be accomplished from July 1 to October. Honestly, I didn't anticipate that this was going to cause a problem for us in terms of hitting the cap. The other side of this, and I'm surprised, I guess I'm not surprised that we hit the cap, Ms. Masterton was at the end of her career, was making a significant salary. And so keeping her on for those extra few months is how we hit that cap. But I also want to also respond that we have had in place a salary freeze for our administrators for the last 2 years. It's unfortunate that we find ourselves in a position having to have a hearing talking about having a greater than 5% increase in our administrative costs, when in fact our administrators have been living with the salary freeze due to our budget constraints for the last several years. We've cut millions out of the budget each of the last 3 years, this upcoming year included. And so it's a little, just trying to put it all in perspective. This is a one-time thing that we don't anticipate is going to happen again. And I do want to recognize that we have asked our administrators to sacrifice, and they have stood by us and have acted in a very professional way and provided great leadership in our district as our principals, our assistant principals, a lot of our central office administrators. And so I just want to make sure this is represented in the full picture.
Anyone else? Mr. McDonough.
Just a few questions. What was the actual rate if it was over 5%?
10%.
And what was the rate without excluding Assistant Superintendent Masterton or Ms. Masterson's holdover, the cost of that?
I did not calculate that, but it would be, it might even be a reduction. Okay. Without that overlap.
It would have been a reduction.
Yeah,
okay.
It would be negative.
Great. And next year, we don't anticipate having any hearing such as this, or nothing you can see at this point would cause that.
Due to this overlap, next year will be a reduction. It will be negative in next year's budget.
And is part of this administrative cost, do legal fees enter into that?
No.
Okay. It is just the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations salary line item. When the issue here is that for a quarter of the year, we employed 2 people on that line item of the budget.
And our ranking was 370.
Right, I mean,
378 of 388, even with this increase.
yes, so out of the, I mean, to rephrase that, out of the 388 unit school districts in Illinois, Elmhurst is ranked in the lowest 10 when measured by administrative cost per pupil.
That's very good. Thank you.
Any other board discussion? Ms. Stupin?
Actually, that's really what I wanted to point out, is it's really interesting that we can hit or be 5% or 10% over the cap when we are 10 away from the bottom of the lowest ranking administrative cost. So, you know, that's really something that, you know, I really want to look into a little bit more about, you know, the whole tax cap. And I mean, it doesn't happen often. It's an unusual situation for us. But for us to go that far over when we're so far under.
The purpose of the law is that the state of Illinois wants constituents to know if you're going to be giving your administrators big raises. We didn't give anybody a big raise. In fact, we didn't give anybody a raise. What we did do is for 3 months employed 2 people on the same line item of the budget. And that's the sole reason we're having this hearing tonight. Any other discussion? Okay, now I'll open it up to public comment, if there is any. Hearing none, then do I need a motion to adjourn, Mr. Fernand? All right, I'd like a motion to adjourn this public hearing in order to return to our regular meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Hirsch, seconded by Mr. McDonough.
Second.
Thank you. Perfect. Voice vote? All in favor of adjourning the public hearing to return to open session to our regular meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion passes. We're back in our regular meeting. And with that, we get to go to the best part of our regular meeting, and that is student recognition. We'd like to recognize the York High boys track team, state champion pole vaulter. Right in the middle, where everyone can see.
My name is Stan Rell. I'm the coach of the boys track team at York High School, and I'm very proud to represent the team in the recognition of Nick. We had 8 individuals that competed in a state meet this year, and Nick was the best of the best. These athletes always have great stories. I think it was maybe 18 months ago when Nick's back was bad enough that we were wondering if his pole vault career would continue. In fact, I think he got some medical advice that said, maybe you should just stop doing this activity. Anyway, he persevered and went on. Last year, he was an all-state representative. He finished 9th. And there's about 30-some pole vaulters that make it to the state meet. He was 9th, and 9th was the last individual to become all-state. And this year, we think, with maybe 4 individuals ahead of him from last year, he jumped ahead of him and became a state champion with a great vault of 16 feet 3 inches. In high school, it used to be 14 feet, was pretty good. In fact, last year, I think your best vault was 14 or 14.3. He improved 2 feet in 1 year, which is a remarkable achievement. I'd like to recognize his event coaches who could not be here tonight. One was a recent addition to our staff from Morton High School, Joji Aneshi. He's been with us 2 years. And the other coach has been a volunteer with our district for 27 years. A volunteer, and he's been with our pole vaulters all that time. And we're still looking up. We think Nick is the first pole vault champion in York history. All right. And outstanding, and next year he's going to represent our school in the Big Ten. He will vault for the University of Minnesota. And we think we're going to have, we think at this point next year, there will be 5 York graduates that will represent our school in the Big Ten, and Nick will represent us at the University of Minnesota. You know Nick, you know what a great young man he is, and if you don't know him, I feel sorry for you. I'm really proud to sit here and say this, because after last year, I thought he'd move up a ways, but to become a state champion, a lot of things have to go right, and you have to be a very committed athlete, and he was. So, thank you very much.
Say a few words too in there.
The torture's not over.
Yeah, sorry, the torture is not over, because I happen to know Nick and his family for almost Nick's whole life. And if you don't know, he is referred to as the flying squirrel. And if you Google Nick Scarbosa, you will find a picture and an article about the flying squirrel from this year, and talking about his 15-foot vault hurdle that he achieved. And then he goes on to state championship at 16.3, which he was pretty darn excited about. But really, I wanted to congratulate all of you. I mean, Stan, you know, everyone talks great about you. And Coach Joe, yeah. You know, he's a great addition. The track and field, you know, is remarkable. You all do such a great job. So, you know, congratulations to Nick, congratulations to all of you, because it really was a team effort. I know that Nick did a lot and learned a lot about himself through this sport that he can also apply to the rest of his life academically and in his endeavors, whatever he chooses. And it's kind of interesting, a little bit of tidbit for Nick. I know that we all, you know, in middle school, actually grade school and middle school, thought Nick should be the runner. He was a runner, but he didn't feel the passion. So freshman year, he decided he would try pole vaulting. And something, you know, courageous, really. It was something different, it was unusual, especially for us here at York anyway. But he was able to be passionate about it, find something that he's passionate about in an extracurricular activity that he had no clue what he should do. And he learned an awful lot about himself. After he won the state championship, I asked him, what was going through your mind? He talked about all 4 years. He talked about his coaches. He talked about his parents letting him not necessarily run, but, you know, do what you feel passionate about. And he talked about how he prepared for that day for state championship and what he learned from the previous year being at state championship. And he talked about his teammate who will be there next year, Sean. And you know, that Sean, you know, now he's got the experience of being in that position of competing at the state level, which is so different than any other competition. And he talked about what he learned last year, what he learned, you know, what he could do from a focus standpoint, stepping aside out of the sun, to, you know, kind of ignoring people and getting in his zone and understanding what he needed to do. And if you look at the flying squirrel picture, it gave me a really good, not just visual, but thinking about all the elements that go into pole vaulting. You know, so it's the stride, it's, you know, where you plant, it's, you know, how you go over the bar, you know, all of these different things. And those were all of the pieces that he was preparing for before he did, you know, each one of the vaults before the final. But so, you know, this is a young man who really wasn't a competitive sports person, but really learned a lot about himself. So I believe that Nick is going to have a great story for students and people, you know, through his life as he looks back at this experience. And it's not just about the sport, but it is going to really transcend Nick's life from, you know, talking to him. So just a little bit of a story so that you understand what Stan said is, you know, if you don't know him, I'm sorry, but now hopefully you can know him a little bit better. And it's really what we are about here, you know, in Elmhurst and in education. It's not just about that one thing that you do of sports, but it's how it applies to the rest of your life. So Nick, with that, we're proud of you. You know, we're proud of the coaches. We're proud of, you know, the athletic department and everyone that goes into it. So congratulations. I'll stop talking, but I have to read a long proclamation. So whereas class of 2012 senior Nick Scarbosa won first place at the Illinois High School Association's state track meet held May 26, 2012 at Eastern Illinois University by clearing 16 feet 3 inches to earn the Class 3A boys pole vault title. And whereas Nick is the first state champion pole vaulter to represent York Community High School, is the 8th all-state pole vaulter in York history, and is only the 3rd to earn the honor twice. And whereas the continuing success of the boys track team has been achieved through the contributions and support of many individuals and groups within District 205 community. And whereas the effort, dedication, and teamwork developed through the sport of track and field has a lifelong influence on the members of the 2012 team. And whereas the accomplishments of this team brings pride and prestige to York Community High School, to District 205, and to the community of Elmhurst. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education and Administration of Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205 express congratulations to Nick Scarbosa, his parents, head coach Dan Reddle, and assistant coach Joe for their outstanding achievements. Congratulations, Nick. Thank you. Stan, this is for you. And once again, thank you for everything that you did. So now I know.
Good luck next year. Look it up.
All right. And on with business. The next item on the agenda is public comments. We have 3. The first from Elizabeth Dirkscheide, followed by Holly Kost, and the third from Monica Ficken. Now, do I have that order correct? Is that the order? Okay. If you could come up to the microphone, state your name and address, and just to point out, it is our policy not to comment on what's said at public comment, but it is our policy to listen closely.
Good evening, my name is Elizabeth Dirkscheide. I reside at 301 North Addison Avenue. Together with Holly Kost, I co-chair the York Academic Boosters, a committee of the York Parent Teacher Student Association. Our committee is made up of about 25 members, including 2 board members, Maria Hirsch and Karen Stugan. We'd like to thank them this evening for giving even more of their time to District 205 than they already do via their membership. We'd also like to take a moment to share with you some highlights from the past year. Results from collaboration between our members, other fellow parents, York administrators, especially Diana Smith, Rob Wagner, Chris Covino, Amy Thompson, and the York faculty and students. First, our mission statement, which guides our efforts. York Academic Boosters are committed to raising school and community awareness of academic achievement at York High School. We do this by partnering with York and the community to recognize both high achievers and those who strive to improve, working to increase participation in and recognition of academically related clubs and activities at school and in the community, and advocating for strong and diverse course offerings that challenge every student. In recognizing achievement, we worked with York staff this year to encourage the introduction of a 2-tier honor roll. Students are now recognized for achieving a 3.0 to 3.49 GPA, as well as for achieving a 3.5 GPA and above. Students and parents alike received personal emails from Principal Smith congratulating them.
Honor rolls were posted on York's website, and Power School reports now reflect honor roll and high honor roll status. Academic boosters, by means of donations from parents and McDonald's, offered a morning donut and apple slices to all honor roll students. We also worked with Mr. Wagner to spread the word about academic clubs and activities. Beginning with 8th grade transitions night, academic clubs were highlighted at York's Amazing Race. Academic club successes, as well as academic achievements in every subject area, were also highlighted via our Academic Boosters website, which is housed on the York home site. At the same time, York has done its own work, elevating communication about high levels of academic achievement and successes of academic participants. Daily announcements feature weekend and weeknight successes of Scholastic Bowl, law team, and others, as well as athletic events. Academic Boosters also applauds the administration for including academic club opportunities within each subject area in the course guide at York this year. It's another great way to highlight for students how they can get more involved in their favorite subjects outside of classroom work.
Our signature project this year was the introduction of the Making the Most of York Parent-to-Parent Guide, which Elizabeth will now hand out to each of you. The purpose of this guide, and it's something we did spend a lot of time putting together, was to share parent knowledge that we've uncovered over the years about York academic opportunities, and to ease the transition for first-time parents and their students, also to get parents and students talking about the different opportunities available at York. The chapters in the book include how to plan your 4 years at York, information about your counselor, tips on how to fit everything into your day and your year, also how to get help with your homework, and different locations at York that you might want to get homework help. Testing, information about district-wide tests as well as high-stakes college testing, college planning, extracurricular academic options, the different honor societies and awards at York, and a very extensive glossary of terms. This is a lot of information that wasn't necessarily available in one place, so we kind of put it together in one book and thought it was great to hand out. We distributed over 200 copies of this little green guide, primarily to incoming parents at the 8th grade academic night, which is in January at York. Although current York parents have also found it very helpful. The guide is posted on our online website and will be updated next year with new content based on parent feedback we received over the year. The York administration helped us with this book, approved it, suggested comments, and appreciated the parent guidance that was being offered. So we didn't do it on our own, we worked with the administration. Academic Boosters also supported student honor panel presentations at the 8th grade academic night, an optional session for all incoming 8th grade students that was new this year. We volunteered at the York Duke Decision Day, which is on May 1st, when all seniors can post their college decisions on a big map and locations of where they're going in their futures. And also put together a thermometer of scholarships that shows visually how much academic scholarship and merit scholarship money was awarded to York students, which was over $1 million this year, to try to promote that and let people know about it. This event celebrated seniors, but also helped the younger students visualize the paths to success that post-secondary planning can have. We also engaged in substantive discussions with the York administration and faculty regarding the enriched math curriculum, resulting in a parent and student survey to gather feedback on potential program changes, which is a great thing, and we're really happy to see that. For STEM, this coming year, we're working together with York Math, Science, and Industrial Tech departments in the College and Career Center and dozens of students to plan over the summer an interactive Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math Day for high school students Saturday, November 10th. This event is including York teachers, community members who work in STEM-related fields, and a community resource fair which will be held in the Commons. We want to thank Shannon Ebner for helping us with this, and we plan to build on these activities next year, continuing with our honor roll days, 8th grade transitions, updating our book, and partnering with York. Thank you. am Monica Fickner, and I live at 325 Scottsdale. I wanted to thank Holly and Elizabeth. This booklet is really great. And just to say that Donut Day definitely got my kids to school early this year. I want to thank the board so much for tonight for your meeting with all of us, and I just want to thank you guys for how much work you put in. I realize that there is just a lot of pieces that go towards all of your volunteerism, and it is volunteerism, and I do appreciate it. And I just wanted to make an official comment, like I mentioned when we were at our little discussion. I think you guys, you're doing a ton of work, and a lot of it is about budget cuts and stuff. I really think you need to think about doing monthly or quarterly, all the stuff, the great things happening in District 205. Just a little sheet, a little briefing page, a little USA Today with some photos or something to remind all of us all the great things that are happening, the staff, the programs, you know, what's going on. That is kind of my suggestion to maybe help through some more difficult times and difficult decisions that you all are making, and might help remind people of all the great things that are going on. So thank you so much. Good evening.
I thank everyone for their comments this evening. And the next item on our agenda is Superintendent's Communication. Mr. Purnell.
Two items this evening that I'd like to bring up. The first one is FOIA requests that we received. Again, we review these at the board meeting. We had 3 FOIA requests that were received regarding the bids for the Lincoln School weatherproofing, and all of those FOIA requests were granted. So, thanks. The second item under my report this evening, I have put in front of the Board of Education the policy, board policy, and let me make sure I have the number right. It is 2220. Thank you. Policy 2220, and it's specifically, we'd like to point to the board the section on minutes and board minutes that are taken at both closed sessions and open sessions. Board Improvement Committee has had some concerns and had discussions about board minutes and how they are presently being taken. And if you look at the minute description itself in your board policy, it states that there would be a summary of the discussion on all matters proposed, deliberated, decided, and a record of any votes taken. Some of the concern is some of our minutes are running as long as 30 pages. And that certainly does not reflect a summary of the Board of Education. And so the School Improvement Committee had some concerns about that. And so I'm going to turn it over to Karen Stupin, who will give a summary of that Board Improvement discussion on minutes and a proposal on where we should go.
Thank you, Mr. Purnell. And thank you, Ellen Walsh, for taking copious meeting minutes for us too all these years. You know, what we wanted to do is the board improved, actually, it came up in many different discussions for the past year. And so the Board Improvement and Policy Committee have discussed, you know, what do we need to do? And we actually went back to the policy, and this policy 220 really articulates the procedures for meeting minutes. And you know, I just think that over the years, you know, we just kind of got off track and started, you know, putting more information in. But the point being is, we do video record and audio record the meetings. And therefore, you can get a verbatim. And that is an accurate depiction of the conversations. So what the Board Improvement Committee would like to do is to propose to the full board and reach consensus around, or gain consensus around, can we adhere to our policy? And if you look at this policy, specifically in the meetings, it articulates that we do want to have, you know, all of the discussions that we have that are voted on, how they're voted on, and a description of the topic, but if we're trying to put more of the conversation in, we either have to have all the conversation or just a summary of what was discussed and what the outcome is. And that's what's identified in our policy. So what we would like to do is gain consensus from the full board. Can we adhere to our policy with regard to meeting minutes for these board meetings? And we do want to highlight the discussions that we have, a brief summary of what that discussion is, and any votes. And for anyone who wants a verbatim, that they listen to the audio or watch the video, because then they will get the true discussion. And I know that one thing that we as board members said is, we're always saying, wait, is that really the discussion? Did it capture my comments? And it is very time consuming, not only for our personnel to try to capture what we're saying, but also for us to review to make sure that it really does represent our conversation. And we kind of, quite frankly, have all said at different times. It really doesn't, you know what I mean? You really need to get either the video or the audio to capture the true essence of the discussion. So is the board in consensus that we can adhere to our board policy and kind of pare down our meeting minutes? And if someone wants a verbatim, that they listen to the audio or the video. Any discussion?
I'll start. Yeah, I'm in agreement. It's cumbersome to review minutes, but if you have several meeting minutes that you need to review and they're 20, 30 pages each, it's hard to get through that and make sure all of the essence of the discussion is captured in that many pages. So yes, I'm in agreement to have meeting minutes be a few pages, whatever is reasonable for the meeting. But just a handful of pages would be best.
Ms. Hirsch?
I have no problem supporting asking Mrs. Walsh to try to capture the essence of the conversation, I think is what we're looking for, as opposed to a verbatim, this person said this sentence. I think the point is, you have to remember we're a body of 7, and we take individual votes, right, as a board, and so our votes will be recorded individually. However, the discussion and the consensus and the deliberation that we do is part of the deliberative process, but really, individual comments, I'm not as concerned about who they're attributed to. The purpose of the comments and the deliberations is so that we can each come to a decision, and then our decision is recorded accurately in the minutes, which is always the case with Mrs. Walsh. I think it might make it easier on Mrs. Walsh. I don't know if it makes it easier or harder to try to go topic by topic and provide, a snapshot of a summary of the discussion. But I have no problem with attempting to make a shift to a shorter and different approach to taking minutes.
Ms. Roney?
Are you suggesting that we not include the motions in the minutes?
Oh, no. Those would be included, I'm sorry. I just meant the discussion around, I think, Maria Hirsch said that we should be, having all of our children arrive at 7 in the morning. Individual comments don't need to be attributed. I think the point is, what was the meaning of the conversation that was had? What were the concerns that were expressed? They don't need to be attributed to individual board members, but obviously motions, seconds, votes are taken, and those would be recorded.
Because that's not really clear, the way the policy is written, whether or not the motions should all be repeated. And I just wanted to make sure that our secretary is going to be able to get it the way we want it.
Can I clarify what you're saying, Susan? Because item number 7 says a record of all motions, including individuals making and seconding the motions. And we want to make sure that that everything is recorded. It's just that no one humanly possible can get every single word we say.
So whoever wrote this policy should have put that up underneath point number 3 before the roll call is taken. Never mind, it was probably me.
Mr. McDonough?
There's a whole continuum on how detailed you go with the word summary. And think what we're saying is recognizing individual comments, even if they're characterized as conclusions, is not constructive because it requires a certain amount of board time to check it and to make sure that it's capturing the flavor. And I think in some ways it allows, it may cause more, less clarity than more clarity. I think it's just better if it summarizes what the discussion was about.
Yes.
The ideas that came forward stated in general terms, and then I think the tapes should speak for themselves and give people flavor and who said what.
Any other discussion? Now, require a motion, just a consensus.
No, we were just looking for consensus, so we will, we will start looking at the minutes and start reflecting what the board consensus on was.
Great. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of board meeting minutes, appropriately so, of May 16th, 2012 and May 22nd, 2012. Anyone not like how they were quoted? Any proposed changes? Okay. I will accept a motion to approve the minutes from those two meetings. Anyone?
I move to approve the May 16, 2012 minutes and May 22nd, 2012 meeting minutes as presented.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Moved by Mrs. Ebner, seconded by Mr. McDonough. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes from May 16th and May 22nd, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Next is board committee reports. We'll start out with the Board Improvement and Policy Committee.
All right, so first I'm going to begin, let's see, May 23rd is when we last met, and it seems like years ago. But I'm going to first start talking about the board improvement and community relations discussion topics. First up was the legislative engagement by the board. What we're trying to accomplish here is that there's advocacy from our board and a collective effort as to getting involved with legislation and communicating to our legislators the positions that we're in within education. So it's kind of a two-way thing. What we did at this meeting was John Moss, who happens to be the Federal Relations Representative on LEND, and actually has been with LEND since its inception in the early 80s, who's also a legislative liaison in Glenbard District 87. What he did was share two perspectives. One, his role as a federal relations legislative representative on LEND, so he represents all the federal level education legislation. And he keeps everyone within DuPage County aware of what that is. And it's two-way. It's information coming from DC out to us in DuPage County, and it's also when we have to have a call to action and we need to advocate. The second thing, which was really important for us, as we look at how do we collectively in District 205 and the board members work with legislation, is since he has been with Glenbard District 87 for 32 years, they have had a board, district, community organization around for a number of years, and we wanted to obtain some quote-unquote best practices of how they do that, and so that's why we asked him to come in and begin to educate us as to what we can do. Outcomes from that was one in particular is we are going to have a list at the ready, if you will, for every time that we get a call to action, which seems to be more and more so. That we have a list of who our legislators are, contact information, and so when there's a call to action for us to contact our legislators, to educate them or advocate on behalf of education, that we have that. The second thing is that what we're going to move forward and discuss at our next committee meeting is having a meet the legislators, if you will, where we will ask our legislators to come in, potentially one-on-one, one legislator to come in and meet with us like a committee of the whole, so that they can share with us, what is upcoming legislation that's affecting education, and we can have that conversation of the impact to us. And we begin to build more of a personal relationships with our local legislators and the legislators that are representing us, because that has more impact, is what we're learning from other districts. So that, in a nutshell, is legislative engagement by the board and what we're doing. I'm trying to share a little bit more information based on the feedback that we got in Meet the Board earlier this evening, so that everyone gets a flavor of really what we're trying to accomplish, what we discussed at the meeting, and then the outcomes. The next topic was planning a board improvement retreat and our board self-evaluation. We all, what we do for everyone is we do a self-evaluation annually, is what this board has been doing, and we are holding ourselves accountable to, are we executing what we had planned to, and how well are we doing that. So with that, we created a survey based on our 3 strategy meetings last June. And we all responded to that survey, and we got the results. And on June 26th, from 6 to 10, we will have a meeting with IASB, our Illinois Association of School Board representative, who will facilitate that discussion. And the outcomes will be, what are we doing well, and we need to communicate to, Mrs. Fickner's comment earlier, to communicate to everyone, whether it be employees and parents and community, what we're doing well, and the areas for improvement we will prioritize and try to chip away at getting better at what we do. So that is planning for the board improvement, board self-evaluation. Engagement of the board and community, we had our first meet and greet this evening, right before this public board meeting, and we got some good feedback, and we asked for additional feedback, whether that be in writing or email to District 205 email address. And it sounds as though we will continue that process, and we will continue to fine-tune it based on feedback that we get from community members. School board governance recognition. This is something that came from the IASB, and what they're doing is they sent it out to all the school districts, and you could recognize how well you're doing. We as a committee decided not to apply for the school board governance recognition. All the things that they will evaluate us on the application are the things that we had decided last June that we wanted to work on, and we're continuing to do that. We felt as though we needed to go through our self-evaluation first and get a year under our belt, and reevaluate next year. Board meeting procedures, we talked about one of them. Once again, thank you, Mrs. Walsh, for doing a fine job with our minutes, and thank you for being flexible with any changes that that we discussed and you work with the administration on. The second piece was brought to our attention about the voting method, just FYI, and it's in the same policy 2220, and we wanted to make sure that we adhere to our voting method, and what it is in particular the sequence of casting votes. And the way that our policy reads and how we want to adhere to the policy is that the sequence of casting votes shall begin with the board member that makes the motion, followed by the board member who provides the seconds the motion. And then it would rotate the remaining 4 board members and then end with the board president. Board improvement, let's see. Policy discussion topics. We really didn't discuss the policies in detail because prior to the meeting we get the policy revisions. And we implemented earlier, based on the board's approval, of if they are minor changes, footnote references, legal references, that that the administration would, send it to us. And there really weren't any significant changes, so we all had read them earlier and, decided to focus our time on other items that we wanted to discuss because it was, for us, a no-brainer that we wanted to adhere to the IESB recommendations on the minor changes to the policies that actually are in first reading in this meeting agenda. So that's what I have.
Thank you. Any discussion, Mr. McDonough?
It's a personal pet peeve. Could we not call it meet and greet? Could we call it meet and listen, meet and discuss, something like that? I think it's a real good improvement. I think we're keeping some of our promises in inviting the public to come talk in a two-way discussion session, and for some reason that name just grates at me. So if we could just call it meet the board or discuss with the board or something like that.
I would be happy to support that semantic change.
Semantics is what
Serge?
I want to thank the Board Improvement Committee. I think for the 3 years that I've been on the board, we've been trying to solve the problem of how do you truly engage with people that we represent. We hear from the people that we know in town. We get feedback on certain things. Many of us still have children in school, so we hear from our friends. But I think a true engagement opportunity is going to allow employees to come in, is going to allow community members whose kids have already graduated from the schools and are taxpayers and are supporting the schools, those taxpayers in town who do not send their children to the public school system. I think we have had a desire, or at least I've had a desire, to hear from all of our constituents. It's not easy to figure out how to do it with the constriction of the Open Meetings Act. It's a well-intentioned act. Sometimes it's a little bit cumbersome. But I think that this is a good first attempt. I think we'll always, in the spirit of continuous improvement, always work to improve it, but I think we are seeking out and are working very hard to try to come up with ways that we can truly engage in conversation around topics. Even after the 1 hour while we were working out the technical difficulties, we were already talking about ways that we can improve upon the process. So I encourage all of us to give feedback to the Board Improvement Committee. I look forward to hearing a summary of the feedback that we get from our constituents and continuing those efforts. As much as we all put a lot of hours in, I think we make the best decisions when we are best informed about the values and what our community wants to do with their tax dollars, with our education system. So I compliment the Board Improvement Committee. I know it was hard to get it on the calendar, but I want to continue those efforts.
One thing I forgot. Can we set up what our default is on holding these things? If we can get the consensus of the board, how often should these things be? Should they be quarterly? Should they be monthly? Should they be whatever it is? Before we head back to our committee and plan the next one, I think it would be helpful to have that input. Or do we just want to field that input, by individual communications?
Well, I think the Board Improvement, in my personal opinion, if you're asking me, Board Improvement Committee maybe should discuss, we've had one now. So the question I'd like to pose to the Board Improvement Committee is, how do we do it better? And come back with a recommendation of timing and frequency and length, just from our observations of this one. So I would encourage the Board Improvement Committee to ask board members, seek their input, and come back with some suggestions next month, and we can discuss it and put a plan together for this coming school year. Research.
I'm sorry. Actually, sorry, I want to let Ms. Zedner speak, but I also want to respond directly and give you some immediate feedback. I think there were a couple of topics that had come up that were perceived as though they have been around for a number of years. And I think that one idea that I'll toss to the group is that we schedule a specific night for a content discussion, a roundtable discussion where we're talking about whether it's a curricular topic, whether it's a science curriculum, and we narrow the scope because there's a lot of different areas, and it could be something that is kind of assigned to the committees to come up with. In the curriculum committee, you can say, what are the 3 things that people really want to talk about? I think it's also something we could look at in terms of scheduling our board meetings and ensuring that at every board meeting, there is some discussion about student engagement, student activities, student learning, something related to students in every meeting that we have. Just to make, those are my thoughts.
Mrs. Evans?
Yeah, I think for engagement with the community, it needs to be a variety of groups. We need to focus beyond community members, which we had tonight. I mean, that's great, but we also need to connect with other groups. Last month, I attended a brown bag lunch at one of our elementary schools and sat down with teachers and ate lunch with them, and there was no agenda, and it was a really good way to understand a teacher's perspective on what their day-to-day job is. And if we could set that up more frequently with our schools, and it's easy to do, there's no agenda, and listen to what our teachers have to say. That was very, very helpful for me to get their perspective. So we need to focus on a variety of groups. I also have a comment about the minutes. There's one line in the minutes about evaluation and assessment of our legal counsel. What are our next steps on that? Are we continuing that to the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Anyone? Mrs. Durham?
I want to compliment the committee as well on the efforts to engage our legislators. I think we have to be really on top of what's happening in all those arenas, be it state or federal. I would caution us, however, to be very careful, especially in election years, as to who we invite and when, because we don't want to politicize it. We don't want people coming because they think they have a forum. I mean, the purpose of it is to get them to know us and us to know what's on their minds and make sure that our priorities are with them, but we need to be careful.
Just so that you know, that was the topic every time we have this on the committee, because we're constantly reminding ourselves that, yeah, it's the objective of the students in education, that's what it's about.
Anyone else? Should we move on to curriculum and instruction? Mrs. Evans?
We discussed the REACH program on June 6th, last Wednesday night. That was our only agenda topic. So we really had an in-depth discussion about our REACH program, which was our gifted program. It was the first time we've talked about this program for the entire school year in our curriculum and instruction committee. So the first thing that we reviewed was an overall review of our description of the REACH program, what the numbers are, how many kids are in our gifted program at each grade level from 3rd grade through 8th grade. And I guess, Charles, we're going to be adding percentages to that spreadsheet. So those attachments haven't been posted yet, the attachments from the meeting, but they are posted now.
No, they will be tomorrow morning.
They will be tomorrow morning. Okay.
We adjusted the spreadsheet this afternoon.
Okay, so the attachments from the meeting will be posted tomorrow morning. So you haven't seen these numbers yet because we needed to modify or add more information to them before we post it. So anyway, we have the numbers of the enrollments for the REACH program, and we agreed on several items. There are more students gaining admittance to our REACH program, and they are deserving of this placement. And there is a significant difference in RIT scores. I'll explain what a RIT score is. This is a math testing that is done several times a year. RIT score is the score that the student achieved. And we saw there's a very wide, there's a big difference between what our REACH students are achieving versus regular placement students. And another point that we agreed on was at the 3 middle schools, we have very similar percentages of REACH students in English and math. So we were happy to see that at Bryan, Sandburg, and Churchville. Very similar percentages. Then we also talked about the high school, who is taking weighted courses at the high school, and those numbers have increased significantly each year. We have 662 kids taking, students taking AP tests. We have more students taking weighted courses, which is really, really good. We have new students taking AP classes as well as existing AP students taking more tests in AP classes. Our AP pass rate is quite high, at over 90. We talked about trying to get more students taking AP classes, and this pass rate may go down, which would be okay. We want to see more students taking AP classes. Any questions so far? Did you want to add anything from the meeting, Jim or Maria or Susan?
Just one of the things that's noted in the minutes, it says that I was looking for more English AP courses, or there were fewer English AP courses offered than in other subject areas. I think when we looked at the weighted courses, and the idea was we're looking at how much rigor we have, how many offerings we have in different subject matter areas that we can offer at the high school level. And I noted that there are fewer offerings that are considered, either honors classes or AP classes in the English department. And I think it was kind of a little bit of a challenge to our curriculum team in terms of what types of offerings we might be able to offer in the English language arts curricular area at the high school. Is it appropriate that we have 4 offerings, but in math we have, I'm going to take a ballpark, 18 different offerings in terms of advancement in mathematics? And it isn't so much that, how many courses we offer, it's more of the approach of how many opportunities do we have to offer students to take the critical communication, writing skills, language skills, and when you think about what employers are looking for in their employees, which is basically what we are trying to do, is prepare our children for further education and for the work life, is they need to have very strong communication skills. And so it wasn't appropriate that we had that narrow band of challenging offerings. That was really good.
Mr. McDonough.
I'm going to go back to that REACH thing. You cited that the REACH rate in all 3 middle schools was equivalent, and that was good. Can you tell me what that's indicative of? And just kind of walk me through that. I kind of got an intuitive sense, but I'd like to hear the actual.
Okay, this is students placing into 6th grade courses for REACH in English and math. What it tells us, and Charles, you can add your thoughts too, is when I look at this, we have consistency among our middle schools for reading and math. The instruction, there's a lot of consistency. And Charles, do you want to add more to about the percentages?
I can't recite them verbatim, but I think it is a good sign for a district when we see consistency across the schools. I know that there's been an existing concern about some differences throughout the district, and I think this shows that some of that concern is maybe misguided or doesn't play out.
It's that the evaluation is consistent, that the program prior to REACH, 6th grade REACH is consistent. These are what's indicated by this consistency in qualification. Is that right?
Well, certainly I want to say that's what it is. That it's quality instruction, quality curriculum, and I think that it's showing the unification of the district as we come together around some common goals.
Great.
Ms. Hirsch.
On that topic, Mr. McDonough, I think there's been a perception that the REACH program just pulls a percentage of students, and if you were to make assumptions about the raw academic power or strength of the students in all 3 middle schools, there were perceptions about what each middle school student body was capable of. And so there's this perception that at a smaller school that might not have supposedly as strong a student body, the facts don't bear it out. If you look at what our students' accomplishments are, look at the data for all 3 middle schools. Regardless of the size of the middle school, we are seeing that we have a good number of students and approximately similar percentages in all 3 attendance areas for students prepared for, higher level work. And I think there's a perception that's been out there that one school might be stronger than another, that you should live in this area because this is the best middle school. And the facts, which I think I'm very happy to see, we have data to back this up, those perceptions are not true. And I think that's one of the strengths that we have in the unit district.
Thanks, I appreciate you breaking that down because I think there's some important things that we could say. Thank you.
If I can add just 2 quick points, just adding on to what Ms. Hirsch had to say a minute ago about, first of all, we offer 5 levels of math every year, every academic year at York. I've heard consistently by the community and by our students that we honors weight 2 of those 5. And that in terms of honors credit incentive, there's very little incentive except for the kid that is internally motivated to absolutely challenge themselves to the extreme to take that highest level of math, that most challenging level of math. Many kids have asked, and parents have asked, why don't we have 2 different levels of honors credit for the 2 levels of math that are given honors credit? So why don't we have super honors, or whatever you want to call it, for that highest level, for that enriched level? And then the second point is that in our English curriculum we have 2 levels, and people have a very hard time reconciling the fact that we can have 5 levels of math but only 2 levels of English. And that when junior and senior year, your 2 levels are now either regular or AP, and there's nothing in between. And I've heard that consistently from the community and from students that they would like more levels of complexity and challenge in our English curriculum than we currently have. That's all I wanted to add.
I'll continue the length. I have
Please.
3 more topics. I too, like Karen, I want to add a little more detail this time based on feedback from our first Meet the Board. The next topic for the REACH program was a proposed mathematics course sequence for our incoming 6th graders. This is a big change as far as I'm concerned. Incoming 6th graders in REACH will start with pre-algebra and algebra in 6th grade, move on to algebra and statistics in 7th grade, and then do enriched geometry in 8th grade. Right now our highest level of math in middle school is algebra. So this is going to bump us up to another level of taking geometry in the middle school. So that was a very positive move from the committee agreed on that. We also are going to do some updates on science technology at the middle school. That's one of the topics we heard tonight from community members. We need to improve middle school science, so this is one way to do that, to pilot what are called Nova Probe devices, which will provide a stronger lab experience for middle school kids, get them ready for high school, the rigor of our high school science courses. So that will be piloted, and it is not a large investment, right? Compared to building STEM labs. So this is a small step in the right direction. Okay, next topic was that there is a aptitude test called the OLSAT, and that was in our district 2 years ago, and last year was the first year that we didn't administer the OLSAT test. We do MAP testing, which is achievement tests, and the OLSAT is a different category of test. It's aptitude, and the committee felt like some students are not being identified for the REACH program. They may not do well enough on achievement tests, but have gifted aptitude. So this is going back to Charles Johns. He's going to review this with our principals and determine the best course of action how we would administer this test to select students. It wouldn't be a test for all students, but students that teachers feel that may be missing the mark on the math test but have gifted abilities. The next topic is something that I want the board to come to consensus on. We talked about the philosophy of our REACH program. To give a little background, some districts have a REACH or gifted program that pulls out top 1 or 2% of kids and places them into a magnet school or a different location, and then also challenges academically talented kids in their home school buildings. So we do not do something like that. It is expensive to do, and what we have all of our gifted kids and what we call academically talented together. So we have the top 1% with kids that are a little bit lower on the percentages for math testing. So we put them together with REACH teachers in the elementary schools, and we are trying to get our teachers to learn more about differentiation so they can, within the gifted program, help kids that are grade levels beyond where their peers are, but also kids that are academically talented for their grade level. So it's a wide variety of levels, and we have these kids together and hope to help our teachers provide professional development so they can differentiate and provide instruction to this wide variety of talent levels. So this is really something that Kathleen Liacci and Charles they've asked the board for a philosophy for our REACH program, and they need this direction to move forward and communicate to the community of what our REACH program is. So any comments about philosophy of the REACH program? And also just, we really need consensus now. They've been looking for this for several months, or the past year, so I'd like to just have a discussion about it.
I'm just going to throw this out there. The whole magnet school, the whole, what level are you? Are you the 1% you really are truly gifted? That sort of thing. I would support it. The only piece that I'm concerned about is if we don't have a quote-unquote business case, and you say it's expensive, I can't really give you any comments without seeing a full picture of what we intend.
Well, our recommendation was to continue on the path that we're on now and provide differentiation skills for our REACH teachers. And REACH teachers are also then would possibly become the teacher leaders in their buildings to help other teachers differentiate among children in the classroom. So our recommendation coming out of the committee was move forward as we are currently moving forward.
I think that, and Charles, I'm going to ask you to chime in here, and I just kind of state the case in terms of what feedback specifically you need from the board. I think Mrs. Steuben, there was never a proposal to say, let's carve out the gifted. If you go back to the REACH report, which was written in the previous administration, it was an excellent report that talked about there's 5 levels of giftedness, and if you really got into it, there is a student who has autism could be truly a gifted child. There's many different ways. And I think, again, I'm going to go from my experience, there's some ambiguity in a lot of interpretation and personal perception on what the REACH program is. Is it a gifted program? Is it a talented program? We had a discussion at the end of the meeting. My contention is that mathematics arm of REACH is really acceleration. Now we're talking about doing geometry when the kids are in 8th grade versus enrichment. And there's kind of 2 different ways to do it, but neither of those are really addressing the truly gifted child. That's a very different type of approach. I don't think that anybody was in a position, I don't think the district is in a position financially, there was really no proposal to say, let's create a gifted program. It's more of, let's get some definition around the program and what our goals are for the program. Charles, will you clarify what you're looking for from us?
We were hoping to provide clarification, as you mentioned. There has been some misunderstandings in the community. We hope to air those out. And confirmation of the plan that had been put in place a couple of years ago that we've been working behind is that, yes, this is the program that's been endorsed from the past and that we want to continue.
So it's really confirmation of the report that we had in hand, that direction.
Yeah, that really lengthy study that was done by the ROE and staff from the district 2 years ago.
I have a recommendation of, I don't know the time frame, but can we see, you know, I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't look at I didn't attend the meeting, whatever. If I could get that and,
You know, I'm not sure board members knew this discussion was coming.
Okay.
I'm looking around the table and I don't see, that's not fair to board members to spring that on and have a discussion on this. I would suggest we put it on a future agenda, get the information out to you first so you can review everything, and then come back and put it on a regular board agenda item as a discussion. I don't think you want to have it tonight.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said consensus. I really just want to have a discussion. So I shouldn't use that word, but yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Definitely.
Can we get that REACH report copied to all the board members?
It's on the,
yeah, I know.
it's on, I think, one of the January committee meetings. The report in its entirety is in board docs.
Very good.
I would also ask that, I mean, when we have these discussions, I think in a perfect world, we'd love to offer everything to everybody. And, you know, I think we want to push every kid at every level. But to have a discussion around philosophy, we also have to have a discussion around where we allocate funds. And you know, I think that everybody's for a gifted program, and, you know, who wouldn't be? But I think the reality of where we spend our money and where we allocate our funds, because we do have, you know, 100% of the kids in the schools that we have to serve. So, I mean, I think we have to have this debate against the backdrop of how much of our resources are we allocating in this program. You know, already, I obviously would love to see as much as possible, but by the same token, there's, you know, 80% of the student population that needs to be served as well. We need to make sure that they're being challenged too.
Anyone else? Anything else for curriculum instruction? No. Then let's move on to finance and operations, because I think we have a discussion here as well.
Hopefully it's not too hairy here. All right, on May 30th, we had a facility user group meeting for our facility users. And the main topic of discussion was the new fee schedule, moving to a new fee schedule. You know, it's no secret that we have budget pressures in the district. I think that as Dave and Chris have gone through in the administration and updating and assembling the budget, you know, I think things have tended to not break favorably for us, and it's caused, you know, some concern on that side as well, which has elevated the importance of making sure that we cover our costs through this program, and the need to implement this fee structure as soon as possible. But at the same time, adhering to our commitment to customer engagement, as most of the folks that are going to be impacted by these fee increases are ultimately taxpayers in our district, and many have children in our schools too. So there's hundreds of families that are going to be impacted by this decision as well. So you know, I think it's balancing that need for speed with you know, with our commitment to engagement. So we did invite the users in. We had a draft user agreement in place. We focused on the fee section. Mainly, the primary side of this was a move to an hourly-based fee structure. And then also separate charges for supervision custodial, and then a separate set of charges for equipment. It was a menu approach. And I think what we heard back from the community were that there were questions around the impact on their organization, particularly around how we were going to implement it vis-a-vis supervision, custodial, you know, some of the other charges beyond just the hourly piece. And I think that we engaged in a discussion with them and offered to continue the discussion with them about ways that we may save cost. One of the items that we had discussed was on the supervision side, the potential to contract for outside security at a much lower cost than we're currently paying for, you know, the custodial side for supervision as a way to save costs and bring down the fees. One of the other topics that came up was the need to potentially examine our staffing model to reduce overtime. There are opportunities to to manage shifts in such a way that we start to lower the overtime, because that can be a significant cost to us. And I think coming out of that, with the schedule that we're on now for this implementation, I think that Chris and I have spoken briefly about coming up with some options to, beyond the one that's currently on the table, to potentially simplify the fee structure, integrate fewer menu items so that it reduces the administrative cost. I think in the current list it's $1 per chair, but I can't imagine how much it's going to cost us to track that $1 per chair and actually bill for it and collect it and make sure that we actually set it up and took it down. So maybe there's an opportunity to simplify this maybe a little bit, and also to lessen the variability. So I think our objective is that our customers, when they come use the facility, when they open the bill after they're done, they're not blown away by something that's an order of magnitude higher than what they thought. So I think those discussions are ongoing. We've committed to the community too that nothing's ever perfect the first time we roll this out, and we are going to have follow-up meetings with these user groups as we implement to work through. But we reinforce the fact that we need to move this into place as soon as possible. From a timing perspective, the original reservation, open reservation was going to begin July 1st. Given the timetable, we're not going to be able to have a fee structure in place by then, so we postponed the open reservation system. The schedule now is, Chris and Dave have some thoughts that they want to share with the Finance Committee on the 21st, where we will then finalize a recommendation to the board that we will bring back to the board on the 17th of July, and then open up the reservation system as soon as possible after that, depending on where the board goes with it. So that's the update on that, and I open it up for comments and discussion on whether that timetable makes sense.
So just a point of clarification, Chris, we want to start implementing this or phasing in the approach, and that's what we're saying that comes to us in July 17th? Am I clear or unclear?
Yeah, I think we've gotten to the point where, given the budget strains, we don't really have a choice but to put this in place quickly. But we're committed. These folks are our customers, and so I think in talking with Chris, we were able to get this in place in a reasonable time frame such that it starts being implemented in the new school year. Okay. And it will require us to push back the reservation system opening by 3 or 4 weeks. And we're working with folks to make sure that works.
So where are we going?
Yeah, we have more excuse.
Thank you.
For a year if we need to. If we don't need it, it's extra work to tear them out again next summer.
Mrs. Hirsch.
Clearly, the Finance Committee has spent a lot of time on this topic. I would encourage us just to come to a conclusion as soon as we can. This is 17, it's obviously the next board meeting, we're not ready to go on tonight. But I want to remind us that, yes, these people are our customers and they're our taxpayers and they're our community members. However, we have 8,000 students that we're responsible for, and every dollar that comes in to our district from the taxpayer, our obligation is to ensure that those dollars are going directly to educating our 8,000 students. So while we want to be accommodating to these organizations, we want to offer up our facilities if they're not in use. We do need to make sure we're covering our costs, and I think that this is something that I have absolutely no problem supporting. We need to cover our costs, we need to do it as quickly as possible, and get on with the business of educating our kids and focusing on the larger picture of our financial situation.
Okay. Any other topics for finance and operations? Hearing none. Then let's go to the superintendent's agenda, the consent agenda. Would anyone, Mrs. Hirsch?
I move that we approve the superintendent's consent agenda, including items A through J.
Point of order, if you would ask if there are things that need to be removed first. That way we won't have a motion that not everybody can support.
Withdraw that motion for a second.
I would try the motion.
Anyone like to remove any items? Thank you, Mrs. Jerome. Mrs. Jerome?
Funny you should ask. Item E.
Item E, okay. Any other items? All right, Mrs. Hirsch, your turn.
I move that we approve the superintendent's consent agenda items A through J minus item E.
Do I hear a second to that motion?
Second.
Second. Moved by Mrs. Hirsch, seconded by Mrs. Ebner. Any discussion? That's a good point. All right. Any, does this need to be a voice vote? We,
Roll call.
okay. Mrs. Walsh?
Ms. Hirsch,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner,
Yes.
Mr. McDonough,
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen,
Yes.
Mrs. Drawning,
Yes.
Mr. Bloom,
Yes.
Mr. Collins.
Yes. Motion carries, 7 ayes, no nays. Now, discussion of our, do I hear a motion for item E?
I move
Mrs.
that
Hirsch.
the Board of Education approve the reclassification from unassigned fund balance to committed fund balance in the amount of $2,924,497 as of June 12, 2012.
Would anyone like to second that?
I'll second.
Thank you. It's moved by Mrs. Hirsch, seconded by Mrs. Ebner. Discussion. Mrs. Jerome?
Mr. Welton, I had emailed you asking you whether or not this was going to put us in a bad position in terms of our cash flow in May if we move $3 million of money from our fund balance and make it committed. And you sent me a very eloquent reply, which I'm sure any business manager could understand, but I didn't. Can you say in layman's terms why, can you help me understand why that isn't going to happen if we can't use those funds? To me, the word committed funds says we can't use those funds, and yet we need every bit of $3 million when we get low in May and the 1st of June before our taxes come in. So that, I guess, is what I was trying to ask you in the email. And I'm sure you answered it, but I need pared down language.
Well, the situation with this tax refund, it is a potential refund that we will have to return to the county. It could happen soon. It could go on for a while. Our balance at May 30th first has improved this year over last year at the same point. So I'm more concerned about balancing the budget for 12-13. And if we do balance the budget for next school year, then we should be in a similar spot in May and not at risk of having to do tax anticipation warrants. Tax anticipation warrants is a cash flow issue. This is an accounting issue for the 2012 audit report.
So committed versus non-committed funds don't affect our cash flow in any way? We can use that $3 million to pay the bills, even though we are somehow calling it on a balance sheet or on an audit committed?
It is committed, and as it should be, because we might have to pay this at some point. We need to set this money aside because we might have to return it to the county. You know, could it impact our tax anticipation warrants? It might, but you know, I think this is a conservative approach to a potential tax refund.
Just a question, real quick. I think Susan's question is there going to be a separate bank account that this cash sits in? Or
No.
is this is an accounting entry that goes into the audited financial statements, but it's not like this money gets pulled out of the checking account and put somewhere else? Secondly, about 2.1 million of this is money we haven't received yet. So, right, the 2011 payments are going to come.
Some of it.
Well, we just came, so they don't affect the May 31st balance. So we really need about 800,000 out of the kind of old projection, right, to carve out of this. So it wasn't like you were taking the low point of the fund balancing the original projection and subtracting 3 million from it at May 31. Right, this is a June 30 accounting entry.
It is.
Right. So it's not, if you were previously looking at low point on the fund balance of $3 million and saying, well, this will wipe that out, that's 2.1 million of that is after May 31st. So at June 30, the fund balance will be significantly above $3 million because we've gotten all our first installment of tax payments.
I'm more concerned about next May, not this May. I know we're in good shape this May. I'm concerned about what our cash flow is going to look like May of 2013 and whether or
And we had
not.
budgeted, and most of this was we did not count on the revenue from the hospital in our budget when we were looking to balance the budget. So it's not like that creates a hole that we didn't already have. The only portion of it was, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, is like is that 500,000 in there or what? We had budgeted without the hospital, so most of this was already figured into the budget for this coming year.
Right. What happened was the hospital is new growth, so that is additional tax extension beyond the CPI was the 39 million of the hospital. So we did not project for that additional tax extension in our revenues for next year. So we are so we received more money, or we will be receiving from the hospital more money than we projected. And now that money will be reserved or committed.
But it was never budgeted to begin with. So we're taking most of that funding that's in excess right now, you can call it excess, and committing it for the potential of having to pay it back. And we had talked about this in concept a few meetings ago. The only difference now is there's a piece of this that is an addition that we may have to pay in addition to what we're getting back because of past. And that's about, Chris, do you remember? About $800,000.
Yeah.
So that is the piece that we're committing to that we're going to have to budget for next year if we have to pay that back. But I don't think right now we're worried about the fund equity with the $800,000. The $2.2 million is money we're going to have that we're just going to set aside and commit to, and that's money we never budgeted to begin with.
So if I could summarize, would it be safe to say that what you're going to, you're going to receive this year an additional $2.5 million from the hospital that is new money coming in the door? $2.1 million. So we're going to set that $2.1 million aside because we may have to give it back. In addition, the hospital's applied for tax rebates from 3 prior years. Now that's money we've already spent. So that totals about $800,000. So that's 800. So by committing it, in other words, setting it aside, that's just in our budgeting process for this next school year. That's just $800,000 less that we're going to spend, that we're going to budget to spend. So if in fact we have to refund it during the 2012-2013 school year, It is set aside, and we would not be in a situation where we have to issue tax anticipation warrants. If we didn't set it aside, and we budgeted to spend it, and we had to refund it during this next school year, we may be in a situation where we would have to issue tax anticipation warrants. So this is the conservative thing to do. Does that make it any more clear, or have I just confused the issue more?
No, that's clear. Do we have to do this now? Can we wait and see if we can balance the budget? We've got all kinds of things that are coming in now that make it look like balancing the budget is going to be very difficult. Is this required to be done right now? Or would it be more prudent to wait until we see whether or not we actually can balance our budget and won't need these funds in May of 2013?
It would be more conservative to balance our budget, because we haven't passed the 2012-2013 budget yet. It would be more prudent and more conservative on our part to balance that budget and pass that budget without the $800,000 in it. So by setting it aside, by setting it aside now, we're doing the more prudent and more conservative thing.
And the danger is if we don't do it, if we don't set it aside, and we end up budgeting the $800,000 in the 12-13 school year, then we really would have potentially a real budget problem halfway through next year, some other time. You don't want to do that. So it forces us to say, you know what, we're going to take the $800,000 out of our budget right now, make sure that if we get caught, if we have to pay it back, we have it back, and then we'll deal with, and we'll have to develop a budget with that shortfall in mind. And that's the downside of this, is that this issue has forced us to, again, have a potential reduction in our budget because we have this commitment of $800,000 that potentially we have to pay back to the hospital.
Mrs. Hirsch.
Mrs. Doherty, I agree with you. If it were something that we had a reasonable expectation in terms of a time frame of a decision from the state on this whole issue related to the hospitals, I would feel more comfortable. If it was a decision that was going to come in, if we expected it in another month, I would be more willing to, wait and delay the decision. However, given the nature of the discussions that are going on at the level of the state, I feel as though we can't afford to count on any one of those dollars. They could go either way, and I personally would prefer to just say, take the money, set it aside, and work with the resources that we know we can count on.
Mr. McDonough.
The bill that passed in the spring session operated prospectively. Did it cover 2012 taxes or 2013 taxes? And did it in any way resolve past years, 2011, 2010, 2009? And will those be decided under the old law, which the Supreme Court already sent a pretty strong message about what's a charitable exemption and what's not?
My conversation with our attorney about this issue, that the old law would apply to 2009, 10, and 11. And the new law will apply to next year.
To 2012 collected in 2013.
Right.
Mrs. Doherty.
Don't misunderstand me, I'm not suggesting that we budget the $800,000 and spend it. I'm just questioning what the accounting entry does to our ability to pay our bills next May. If in fact we have earmarked these funds as untouchable. That's all. And I'm hearing in a roundabout way that maybe those two things are separate and that it's not a concern. Obviously it's not, it's on the consent agenda, but I just didn't understand it. I can continue this discussion later if everyone else is comfortable with this.
assuming that we balance the budget, I don't anticipate a need to issue tax anticipation warrants next May.
Let's say, just to extend Mrs. Girone's point as far as we possibly could go with it, that something happens. And in fact, next May, we find ourselves in a deficit situation. Can we uncommit, and it's clear by next May, we're not refunding it to the county government to get back to the hospital in that fiscal year. That if anything's happening, it's going to be in the following fiscal year. Can we uncommit those funds to pay our bills instead of issuing tax anticipation warrants? It is cash in the bank that we have. And if it's clear we don't have to pay it back in next school year or next fiscal year that begins July 1st, could we uncommit it?
Or can you borrow it? I think your question is, does the cash just have to be there on June 30th? So, I mean, if you needed it May 31st, could you use it as long as it was back there by June 30th? It's a liquidity question.
Right, exactly.
Exactly my question.
That would be a legal question. The auditor had recommended that we approve this for the audit. But if you want to postpone it for that question, he wanted it done in fiscal year 2012. He wanted this approved in June for the audit.
Got it.
You're going to get a nasty note anyway, regardless of whether you put this. It's going to end up in the financial statements. There's a significant risk that we're going to owe the hospital this much money. So, regardless of where it shows up on the balance sheet, it's going to end up in a footnote with a big disclaimer to it. We're basically taking a conservative approach to make sure our financials are more forthright and with a perspective.
Well, how would the board like to proceed? To approve it so that we can get it in the audit? Or to explore the what-if question? Okay. So it sounds like we should proceed with the motion on the floor. Then I believe we would need a voice vote to recommit funds?
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Walsh?
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes.
Mrs. Stupi?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mrs. Gironi?
No.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes. Motion carries, 6 ayes, 1 nay. Next is the superintendent's agenda action items. Mr. Purnell.
Yes, the first item is the resolution that was talked about at the open hearing for the public, and that is the resolution on exceeding the 5%, and I would recommend that the board approve that resolution as presented.
Do I hear a motion? Mrs. Gironi.
I move that the Board of Education approve the resolution to waive the limitation on administrative costs.
Second, moved by Mrs. Gironi, seconded by Mrs. Hirsch. Do I need a voice vote on that? No. I don't think so. Okay, we just need a voice vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Second item, approval of resolution to waive, I'm sorry.
No, and I apologize, I took these out of order.
Yeah, Mr. Purnell.
Yeah, and the second item, which is actually is approval of the resolution approving bank depositories. And this is, we're required to do this on an annual basis. And you have before you the recommendation for bank depositories this evening.
Do I hear a motion? Mrs. Hirsch.
I move that the Board of Education approve the resolution which approves the banks, savings and loans, and investment pools which the district may use as bank depositories for the 2012-2013 school year.
Second?
Moved by Mrs. Hirsch, seconded by Mrs. Deroni. Any discussion? Mr. Bloom?
I'll throw out a question I think you asked earlier. Do we have any idea how many of these folks bought our bonds in the bank qualified market?
No.
All right, maybe it's more rhetorical, but I would strongly suggest when this issue comes up next year, if we issue bonds, that those folks are made aware of the fact that we're issuing bonds.
We plan to do that.
Thank you.
I will add one comment that I work for a bank, but none of these funds are being deposited in the bank that I work for. And I just want to make that very clear. All right, any further discussion? All right. I believe I need a voice vote for this as well, right?
No,
No?
not spending money.
No, I mean voice vote as opposed to a roll call vote. I'm sorry. My unclear terminology. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, and then review our upcoming meetings. And there are a lot of them. Tuesday, June 19th, special Board of Education meeting at 5:15 p.m. And that is our board self-evaluation meeting. No, I'm sorry, that is our board retreat. Again, thank you for the help with the terminology. Tuesday, June 21st, the Finance and Operation Committee meeting at 6:30 p.m. Tuesday, June 26th, Board of Education special meeting, and that is our board self-evaluation meeting. Thursday, June 28th, Board Improvement and Policy Committee meeting. Tuesday, July 10th, Board of Education special meeting for our retreat. Thank you. I need to keep all three of those straight. And then Tuesday, July 17th is our regular Board of Education meeting. Sure, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to explain what this flurry of meetings are. The first meeting that's coming up is next Tuesday, a week from tonight, and that is going to be the first part of our board retreat. We've been talking about the board retreat for a while now. We have a lot of goals for this board retreat, but the first step is Mr. Pernod would like to have his executive team lead, and this is a public open meeting. Everyone is welcome. It starts at 5:15. And the plan is for our craft team up there to take us through, and on this side as well, a summary, a recap of the year, what challenges, what accomplishments we've had in the last year by department, as well as anticipation of what their goals are and projects are in terms of their work plan for the upcoming school year. So I think that the target originally, Mr. Pernod, was a half an hour per content area, so curriculum and instruction, summary of where we were for the last year and what we're looking forward to, and that's all 7 board members. Mr. Pernod, the cabinet is going to be there. It is an open meeting, and you're more than welcome to join us for that meeting. The 26th, Mrs. Stupin, do you want to give a recap of what that meeting is?
Yeah, recap from my, the board improvement meeting that we had last month. And that really is a self-evaluation, the board's self-evaluation that's going on.
That's a closed meeting?
It's a closed, I'm sorry, that is a closed session. IASB, which is the Illinois Association of School Board, a regional director who facilitates these board self-evaluations, will be facilitating that closed session with the board and the superintendent.
And then the second part of the board retreat is scheduled for July 10th. That again starts at 5:15. That meeting, we're actually going to be finally talking about the district performance indicators. Again, full board, full cabinet, and we'll be going through the district performance indicators and hopefully identifying some key indicators for the board to focus on. But it's really a good in-depth discussion of the work that we've been doing, trying to build to get to this point. So those are those special meetings. I wanted to explain those a little bit further.
Then we have one more item. Our action out of closed session regarding employment of employee. Thank you, Mrs. Hirsch, for volunteering to make that motion.
Thank you for passing the motion to me. I move that the Board of Education approve a 0.75% salary increase for the non-union, non-administrative salaries as recommended by the administration.
Do I hear a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. Moved by Mrs. Hirsch, seconded by Mrs. Stupen. Any discussion? Go ahead.
Actually, I'm going to ask Mr. Pernod if you can give us first a definition of what employees this motion covers.
This will cover central office support employees that are, again, non-union, non-administrative, along with the food service department. So those are your two big categories of employees under this recommendation.
Thank you. And I just wanted to, the recommendations coming from the administration, I think the 0.75 salary increase, we're in very difficult budget times. We're cutting the budgets. This is something that is very challenging to have to sit here and offer someone less than 1% of a salary increase. However, we do want to recognize that this staff is providing a critical service to our district. We value them. We wish it could be more, but our resources are not available. I also want to mention that as a board, I believe we've been working very hard to provide some consistency across all of our employee groups. And so this 0.75 number actually it is 1/2 of the consumer price index, and that is how the administration arrived at that particular number. So this is in alignment with the types of increases. Our contracts are now tied to the consumer price index in one way or another, some to more of an extent than others. But this is an attempt, I think, by the board to be consistent on how we treat our employees and to tie our compensation to our revenue stream, which is capped by the consumer price index.
Just so I clarify,
Yeah.
so there's not confusion with the public. It's not this year's current CPI. It is the CPI that we collected as a school district, which was 2 years ago. So that is half of the CPI for that year. Again, the problem is we do not collect the CPI on the increase in our property assessments until almost 2 years out. So we are actually basing this increase on the cash flow that we get from that property, and that's a 2-year-old figure. So just so people understand, it's not based on this year's CPI, which was high.
And the other thing I'll point out is this is also the exact same percentage that the majority of our teachers will receive in a raise next fiscal year as well. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Spending money, so we need a roll call vote. Mrs. Walsh.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes.
Mrs. Droney?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes. Okay. Any further than motion, I'm sorry, 7 ayes, no nays, motion passes. It's getting late for me, I apologize. And then move on to our next topic, which is board communications. Anyone have anything to add to the board communications section? Mrs. Stu.
The only thing that I wanted to add is that Len held a special Len meeting on Friday because of the General Assembly still has issues looming, which is the budget and pension, and so there's probably going to be special sessions because they want to pass legislation around those 2 issues.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Second?
I second the motion.
Moved by Mrs. Hirsch, seconded by Mrs. Stufen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.